Chapter 1007, Dealing with the Aftermath. On 160 Birkeland Street, after watching Leonard fly out of the world of concealment with the word of the sea in one hand, Klein turned his attention back onto his surroundings. He first observed Winner Inuni. He originally imagined that he couldn't use the marionette that had been parasitized by Ammon, but to his surprise, he realized that he could control his spirit body threads again. Klein was first stunned before he came to a realization. When Snake of Fate Will Ossipton used Reboot to reverse Ammon's condition in time, it also made the things he parasitize experience similar changes. Hence, Inuni had turned back into his marionette. As expected of the strongest power of a Monster Pathways Sequence 1, Klein heaved a sigh of relief before allowing his figure to fade away from where he stood. He teleported back to his master bedroom, leaving a bunch of marionettes around to defend against any accidents. Right on the heels of that, Klein entered the bathroom and headed above the gray fog. He used Inuni's prayer light and began observing the entire street with the sea god scepter in hand. Without a doubt, his focus was on his residence and Unit 39. He found Butler Walter, Housekeeper Tanja, Member of Parliament Macht, Ma'am Rihanna, and many servants having remnant signs of being parasitized. They appeared somewhat in a daze. As for Hazel, she was on the brink of total collapse. Her hands were on the ground, having pushed herself backwards into the corner. Her back was leaning close to the wall as she huddled into a ball, trembling. Macht and company had noticed something wrong with her. They surrounded her in concern, hoping to know why. However, Hazel would scream loudly whenever they attempted to approach her. She would resist violently, so all they could do was stand meters away, wearing a panicked and helpless look. During this process, they would, from time to time, nudge their glasses or pinch their eye sockets. This only served to leave Hazel even more horrified. She appeared to be on the brink of losing control. Klein felt horrified when he saw this scene above the gray fog. He imagined a scene. Daddy Ammon, Mommy Ammon, Maid Ammon, Footman Ammon were circling around Hazel, trying to soothe her nerves but were helpless. They wore the same expression and the same monocle with different clothes. Even if Hazel were to hold out and not lose control, she would definitely develop mental problems. At the very least, she would be in a half-crazy state. Klein's thoughts raced as he lowered the sea god scepter and returned to the real world. Birkeland Street and the several streets remained enshrouded in darkness. It exuded a serene, tranquil, and profound feeling. This was a world that had already turned into a secret. Klein took down a hat, wore it on his head, and teleported to a director's office in 22 Phelps Street, Lone Charity Bursary Foundation. Audrey had already changed into a light green dress and was daydreaming with a fountain pen in hand, reminiscing over every detail of the punishment operation in the afternoon. Susie, on the other hand, had gone out for a stroll. Suddenly, this noble lady sensed something and looked up. A black-haired, brown-eyed, thin-faced figure with cut facial features was rapidly reflected in her emerald, limpid eyes. This figure wore a white shirt, black vest, black trousers, and black leather boots. He had a cold expression. His body was bent slightly as he held one hand over his top hat. Audrey was first taken aback before she recalled who this person was. Jayaman Sparrow. Although she had never met him before, she had already seen his extremely lifelike picture on the papers and wanted posters. Klein realized that he hadn't changed back to Dwayne Dance based on Miss Justice's reaction. However, he wasn't too mindful of that. He released his hand from his top hat and straightened his body. He said with a nod, "There's something that requires your help." His disguise had also been stolen by Ammon, but after a reboot, it was returned to him. He just didn't have the time to change back into Dwayne Dance. "Mr. World, who's already a demigod, needs my help. He's in need of therapy because of some mental problem." No, it doesn't seem to be the case. Audrey pursed her lips as she put down her fountain pen in anticipation and curiosity. She stood up and gave a serious reply. "No problem." Klein didn't waste any time and walked over. Grabbing her by the arm, their figures faded away as they vanished from the spot. Instantaneously, they appeared outside the activity room at 39 Birkeland Street. This is teleportation. Audrey's eyes turned slightly as she instinctively wanted to ask something. However, when she felt the heavy atmosphere and the screams, her face immediately wore a solemn look. "There's a patient," she asked without much doubt. "It's really easy to talk to a spectator. There's no need for much explanation." Klein tersely acknowledged and said, "Yes, she encountered a supernatural incident and suffered a terrible fright. She's on the brink of losing control. Do you have the means to not be seen by the people inside?" There was no need for him to say his last sentence, as a large-scale illusion was enough to resolve the problem. Furthermore, after receiving the blessings of concealment, ordinary people likely didn't retain much of their corresponding memories. However, after witnessing Adam's powers of invisibility, Klein was rather curious if Miss Justice had such skills at Sequence 6. Mr. World is feeling curious. That's really rare. He doesn't seem to be wearing a thick mask and has changed to a thinner one. He's a really good patient who heeds medical advice. Audrey's chin moved slightly as she nodded. "Yes." As she spoke, she glanced at Jayamon Sparrow, who reached out for the handle, and pushed open the door after receiving her response. Member of Parliament Macht and Mam Rihanna completely ignored this beautiful girl as they discussed in a panic about hiring a doctor. As for Hazel, she remained curled in a corner, trembling vigorously like an abandoned baby animal. Miss Hazel, as a senior spectator, Audrey didn't have the problem of forgetting others. She observed Hazel's condition and frowned slightly. She turned her head and said to Jayamon Sparrow, Mr. Sparrow, can you briefly explain what she encountered? Only with sufficient knowledge can I quickly resolve the problem." Klein was already prepared as he quickly and succinctly explained, "She's a beyonder of the Marauder pathway, a student of a demigod who had nefarious thoughts. Her teacher attracted blasphemer Ammon's avatar and ended up getting herself killed. Her destiny and identity were stolen. As such, Ammon infiltrated her family, parasitizing her parents and servants. Just now, while we were eliminating Ammon's avatars, she realized that her parents and servants had all turned into Ammon. She didn't know that that was Ammon, but she understood that it was a strange existence. If you have anything you wish to understand at a deeper level, things which do not involve the psychological treatment, you can always ask during the next gathering. Blasphemer Ammon. Mr. World and company have eliminated Ammon's avatar again. No avatars." Audrey was somewhat shocked as she instinctively glanced at Macht and company. She couldn't imagine that they had once been parasitized by Ammon and had turned into him. To have everyone parasitized. Audrey recalled Mr. World's words and felt more afraid the more she thought about it. She felt her entire body turn cold as she couldn't help but think of herself if she were in Hazel's shoes. This left her somewhat stifled as she subconsciously cast placate on herself. Is the supernatural world always this cruel and terrifying, or is it just occasionally? After calming down, Audrey muttered softly. She didn't wait for the World Jayamon Sparrow's reply, because from what she had seen at the tarot gathering, she knew the answer very well. Always. Looking back at Hazel, Audrey walked over, filled with pity. She crouched down and first used placate. Hazel looked up blankly and saw a perfect, flawless face, as well as that pair of emerald-like eyes. At that instant, she seemed to return to the ball of that previous night, having witnessed this lady descend like an angel. She instantly calmed down. She saw ripples rise up in that pair of limpid green eyes. They were serene, calm, and deep. "There's no need to be afraid. Calm down. Everything is already over." Audrey used hypnosis to directly communicate with Hazel's body of heart and mind. She heard hysterical screams and the horror that was taller than mountains and deeper than the ocean. Taking into account Hazel's condition and encounter, she quickly came up with a plan for treatment. She directly hypnotized Hazel and made her forget today's encounter and the existence of her teacher. She was only capable of vaguely remembering her identity as a beyonder and other general knowledge. Hazel gradually calmed down before she slowly fell asleep. After you awaken, that terrifying experience will no longer exist, and I was never here. Audrey used a gentle voice to complete the last step of the hypnosis. Following that, she slowly got up and observed Hazel for a few seconds. She pursed her lips and whispered without turning her head, I made her temporarily forget the corresponding memories, but that memory remains. It's just hidden deep down. In future gatherings, I'll continue treating her, guiding her to slowly remember and accept this memory. Only then can her mental problem be completely resolved. Otherwise, perhaps a familiar action or sentence will jolt her awake. She will then break down once again, and perhaps it will result in a direct loss of control. Miss Justice is becoming more and more professional. Klein sighed as he asked cautiously, then you will have to hypnotize all the people who were parasitized. They are not to show any hobbies that don't originally belong to them, like the wearing of monocles. Also, let them pray to the Evernight goddess, after 15 minutes, to obtain complete cleansing and purification. Audrey nodded with abnormal seriousness. No problem. Klein immediately stood to the side, watching this noble lady, Q, everyone who had been parasitized in this house with the greatest feelings of pity.